The Second World War has been marked in human history as a kaleidoscope of atrocities. Through the buffer of time since it ended on the 2nd of September 1945 with the surrender of Japan, it becomes easy to forget the wave of violence that swept the world. Times may change, but human nature does not. For if we studied that which preceded us, and if we were transposed to their situation, we would have done no differently. We will find that it did shake the world beyond its end. Therefore, the ethical implications preluding the Second World War must be considered. The prelude to a war is like any historical event, complex and controversial. To understand this, several conjectures will be explored here. The main players in this game were the nations of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Japan, USSR, and USA. One theory is that militarism was a driving force behind the downward spiral. On the 14th of February 1919, Woodrow Wilson, in a speech to the plenary conference, said, "A living thing is born, the League of Nations." This was a multinational organization, dedicated to upholding peace and encouraging diplomacy. However, it initially excluded Germany in face of its apparent blame for causing World War I. Neither was Russia permitted entry, given the apprehension towards communism. Despite being based on Wilson's 14th point, the United States of America did not join, given that their elections had displaced the prior conservative government to a Republican regime. Their policy of isolationism began.
Number together put on the phone, but when she got there, the company wouldn't give up. She had to leave the club. So here is the story, but gosh and but glory, of how the old girl cleaned up.
The League of Nations, therefore, failed to represent several of the major nations and was flawed in relying on sanctions, which could be circumvented by dealing with non-member states. Armed forces were donated by member states, limited by their unwillingness to reflect badly on themselves. While moderately successful against smaller situations, such as the border disputes in 1925 between Greece and Bulgaria, it simply couldn't stand against the superpowers such as Japan when it invaded Manchuria in 1931. They lacked the influence. Countries were more focused on domestic affairs over foreign policy. Hence, they were too distracted to actively act against rising tensions. So, Japan grabbed Manchuria and later invaded China. So Germany broke the Treaty of Versailles and militarized the Rhineland and merged with Austria. So Italy invaded Abonitia in 1935. And so the Nazi-Soviet pact was set. To serve self-interest and shy away from taking action may be taken as weakness. However, non-interference was a faulty tool for peace in and of itself.
That the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace.
Then there was appeasement, a policy upheld by Britain and France till the invasion of Poland in 1939. The purpose was simple: give Germany whatever it wanted when a need arose to maintain peace. However, this was also fueled by several other motivations. They needed a buffer against a seemingly more provocative communist threat. They felt the Treaty of Versailles had been too harsh and that their own domestic concerns were more of the essence. Above all, perhaps, they thought not to repeat the ripe horrors of the First World War. Unfortunately, this tactic assumed Germany could be trusted. Their unpunished conquest of Czechoslovakia gave them an assertion of confidence, dangerous in combination with fascist ideals. Chamberlain's
Peace in our time
would not come to pass. The last-ditch Munich Agreement of September 1938 was in tatters. Britain and France failed to foresee the ideological differences between their states and that of Germany. It should also be noted that the Treaty of Versailles is not the root cause. It is rather the long-term repetition of giving without punishment. In that manner, states act like the individual. To tame them, one must combine punishment with reward. The core of the militarism appeasement conjecture is that the Allied powers were lulled into a false sense of security. They believed they had the means, and some would argue that they did have the means, to maintain peace while still leaning towards democracy and capitalism. This is evidenced by the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928, which promised not to resort to war to settle disputes of any kind. In retrospect, no such decorum was upheld. One could say there was a certain level of hypocrisy here, claiming peace and prosperity with one hand while simultaneously building up arms to fight unemployment and somehow secure peace. The hope for prosperity outweighed the fear of destruction. Shortly after the end of the Second World War in 1945, the public sought justification for the turmoil they had undergone and supported. One such theory is that Adolf Hitler was to blame for causing the Second World War. This may seem like a scapegoat to evade blame towards the victors. However, his actions when rising to power, his shrewd steps towards totalitarianism and his expansionist policies are all grounds to support this claim. In his early days, Hitler fought during the First World War. September 19, 1919, he gave a comment which already foreshadowed his vision.
The ultimate goal must definitely be the removal of the Jews altogether.
His combination of pride at attaining the Iron Cross and defeat at the hands of the Allies helped brew his racial theories. Hitler's policy of extremism may be addressed here. In Mein Kampf, he outlines his points as follows. Humanity may be ordered into different categories, the highest of which were the Aryans, that the mightiest counterpart to the Aryan is represented by the Jew, and that there is need for Lebensraum, living space, through expansion.
In Millionenmassen des deutschen Volkes neuen Lebensraum geschaffen.
His revelations were blueprints for what was to come. However, the book was apparently ignored by foreign powers. To an unkempt mind, his philosophies of inequality and natural selection of the so-called races seems absurd. However, concepts such as these have plagued human consciousness for centuries in the form of racism, slavery, and extermination. Whether genuine or not, the usage of scapegoats was certainly a useful political tool. After his failed Munich putsch in 1923, the financial crisis provided the playing field needed to gain majority via democratic means in the Reichstag. Nazis were populist, promising what the people wanted, such as glorification and higher employment. However, he eventually became Chancellor in January 1933 through the backstage dealings of Hindenburg and von Papen, who thought they could control his influence. The Reichstag fire gave Hitler emergency powers to counteract supposed communist conspirators. The Night of the Long Knives won over the army, and thus, after Hindenburg's death, he became the Führer of Germany on the 2nd of August 1934. His rise, in hindsight, can be seen as an elegant one, brought about during dips in public satisfaction and through exploitation of his opponents. Hitler proved to be a great orator, his complex agenda hidden behind a facade towards the Allies. In such a way, he said to Chamberlain,
I give you my word of honor that Czechoslovakia has nothing to fear from the Reich.
When later that year, in 1938, he gained the Sudetenland through the Munich Agreement and the rest of the nation through invasion. The English historian A.J. Taylor proposed he was in control of the situation, but he took greater and greater gambles in an effort to instigate war before the combined industries of France, America and Britain could dwarf Germany's military industry.